give me a break. Like, come on.
Okay, I'm not going to give you a break about the math.
The fact that we are in an era where our politics is so personally vicious, even if you are not willing to concede the idea that Americans don't feel optimistic about the future, you must be willing to concede that our politics right now is personal, vicious, divided, ugly.
Smug MAGA pundit Scott Jennings appeared on Kasie Hunt's show to debate the issue of divisiveness in America. Isn't that ironic? We're going to take a look at clips from this panel debate featuring Scott Jennings and others on Kasie Hunt's show. I've got my thoughts to share as well. Let's get into this one.
All right, welcome back. Across the country, preparations are already underway for the celebration of America's 250th birthday this summer. While that milestone comes at a time of deep division and heightened pessimism about the future of the country, all four living former presidents are speaking out about why they have a different, more hopeful attitude about the future of the nation. Presidents Obama, Bush, Clinton, and Biden sitting down for a rare set of interviews with NBC News to share this message of optimism.
When you look at the sweep of American history, we've gone through rough patches, and we tend to come out on the other side of them stronger.
I am not concerned about the long-term health of our country because I've studied enough history to know that we've been through the periods of intense anger and intense rivalry of ideas. But the beauty about democracy, Jen, is that it's self-correcting.
America is bigger than anybody's personal hopes and dreams.
I'm not sure we're as divided as we portrayed.
I would hope people will take a look at our history and realize we're an imperfect nation trying to be more perfect, but be optimistic.
All right, my panel is back. David Chalian, pretty remarkable to watch these four men sit down for these interviews. What went through your mind watching it as someone who's seen it all?
With a presidential daughter, no less. So it's it's kind of amazing.
It helps. Yeah, get that booking.
To get the booking, yeah. But it was. I'm obsessed with the President's Club, and I love to see them all. It was this note of optimism on the occasion of the 250th birth of the country that is so good to hear. Obviously, they come from a really unique perch. That's why it's such an exclusive club, to be able to have that sense of optimism. And I know that may be hard for people who are in the throes of political battle every day, but these guys have served in such a unique capacity to be able to get the whole scope of the country and through history to be able to bring credibility. I don't think it's just some false sense of hope and optimism. I think it's informed sense of hope and optimism that the country comes through these challenges stronger.
I thought in reading all their breadth of what they said, one of the things that struck me was that the kind of through line in what all four of them said went back to the American people, consistently went back to the people, and that their sense of hope was came from having seen people across the country watching them in their own communities. And so I thought that was I personally found that sort of inspiring and optimistic, that the idea that the country will be saved by itself, by the people, by the American people.
Yeah, the thing that struck me when I watched it, and maybe this is part personal but part global, I remember all of them as young men. They all started their careers very early and very young. We sort of watched them through their careers. It's a reminder that presidents come and go, political movements come and go, and they don't really last that long. Just think about when's the last time you thought about...
the Constitution did kind of write it that way.
It did. Touche. But seriously, think about the last time you thought about Franklin Pierce. There's...
Okay, well,
over lunch today.
I was in New Hampshire thinking about the one president of the United States from New Hampshire, Franklin Pierce. The point being, there's a lot of presidents, they come and go. What has endured, and this is what all the presidents echoed, as Kate had said, is that it's the American people, and we are resilient.
Scott?
Yeah, I like it when our leaders talk about a hopeful future. I think that's good for the country. I guess I sort of reject the premise of the conversation a little in that, these are somehow dark times and we're living through this uncertain rough patch. I'm pretty happy,
well,
and I think a lot of people
put this
are.
Up, and I don't want to make this about the current president, but the NBC poll said, do you expect life for your generation to be better, worse, or about the same? And this, right, if there's any difference here, and, I think in many ways, the number that you see on this screen, it helps explain why some of the messaging that Donald Trump and other populists like Bernie Sanders, why what they have brought to the table has been resonating, right? I mean, I take your point. You don't want to take the premise that people are pessimistic, not optimistic. But the bottom line is that's not a number about politics, right? That's about people feeling like the promise of America isn't what it used to be. Right, and even if we look at what the United States is the greatest country in the world, 36% of people said that was true, 41% said it's one of, but only 23% of people said we're not one of the greatest countries.
And if you look at the splits on that by politics, what would you find?
I don't have that slide to
If you looked at this, but if you looked at the splits on how people feel about America, the promise of America, if you look at whether they're proud of their country or not, Gallup has measured this. Republicans and conservatives are proud to be Americans, and it's Democrats and liberals who are not. And I think if you look at the splits in that, you'd find
the opposite of where I wanted
you'd find the lines on the graph going this way. And honestly, I think there's a political movement in this country right now built on telling people that America's rotten at its core, and it's not the Republican ideology.
But see,
Notice that the other three panelists, along with Kasie Hunt, didn't say anything about the political parties before this. They didn't bring up, why are Republicans so divisive, or why do Republicans come off so badly, or why is Donald Trump such a terrible president? And then Scott Jennings goes straight to his usual line, but the Democrats. He says people feel pessimistic about the country because Democrats hate the country, and they're teaching others to hate it too. That's basically all Scott Jennings brings to the table. Honestly, he could save himself a lot of time and effort if he just showed up on these panels, listened to whatever anyone else said, and replied with, yeah, but what about the Democrats? But the Democrats. What about Joe Biden? Then just fold his arms and stop there. Because that's essentially the same argument he repeats on every show he appears on. Scott Jennings never says, well, there's some negativity on all sides, and I wish some Republicans wouldn't be as negative or as nasty as they can be. No, it's always but the Democrats, because in his view, Democrats hate America. That's his entire premise point 27074.
I think this point about partisan divide and the way you're breaking down partisan divide is exactly the problem. This is exactly why people.
The problem to tell you the truth about the numbers?
No, Scott, give me a break. Come on.
Okay, I'm not going to give you a break about the math.
The fact that we are in an era where our politics is so.
There were numbers there, but those numbers didn't really break anything down. They didn't actually say this percentage of Democrats thinks things are going in the wrong direction, and this percentage of Republicans. And yet, Scott Jennings just automatically jumps to it being the Democrats, of course.
Vicious. Even if you are not willing to concede the idea that Americans don't feel optimistic about the future, you must be willing to concede that our politics right now is personal, vicious, divided, ugly, in a way that turns regular people off, doesn't engage. So
I agree. We have Democrats cheering for Iran. I totally agree with you. It's crazy.
Well, so here, this is the perfect example.
Everyone is like, it's like, what's the point? Okay, it's a nonpartisan thing, and it didn't used to be like that.
What is true, to your point, Scott, that when you do look at the partisanship of these things, of when you ask people sort of their outlook of the country or economically, what we've seen, and this gets to our polarization, is that depending on which party is in the White House, really informs, because we live in such partisan times, how people view it. So when a Democrat's in the White House, Democrats feel better about the direction of the country and about the economy and things like that than when a Republican, and it's vice versa when the party changes. And so when you look under the hood, to your point, look at the partisan split on those things, that's not a constant. Our partisan politics define how partisans view that.
And I just think of every single conversation, even about civics in this country, boils down to, are you going to win or am I going to win? That's a problem.
I'm going to add to that. No, just a slightly different point. We are having a conversation about the future of America and lofty goals. What will trend on the internet after this is you two fighting with each other, right?
I'm not fighting.
No, you guys love each other, and we know that. But but this is important, though.
We do love each other.
Well, you do, and I love you both.
I don't care for you as much. But,
all right, this is getting weird, man.
My point is, we are in an information moment in which people are getting calcified in their views because of these algorithms that are feeding people images of you two fighting or you two disagreeing with each other. That is what is sort of I think the darkest thing in our moment that is causing a lot of the division and the partisanship. And that's the kind of thing that the presidents were talking about. Can we get to a place again where Americans can politely disagree and not have it?
What you're raising, though, is the issue of we're not living in a shared reality.
We're not.
This is the biggest difference today for the rest of the country's history. And it's hard to have a shared national purpose when you don't have a shared reality. And so I think one of the things we're going to have to grapple with as Americans is, how do we have more of a shared reality when it comes to our politics?
But those four men, irrespective of party, have a shared reality.
And the issue
that's what was so interesting to hear from them.
Yeah, and the issue is not we have different realities and yours is bad. It's a recognition of the fact that people have different realities. Now, how do we cope with and move forward from there rather than tar the other side as evil? And I think that's the problem we're living with today.
And the bottom line is the incentives, the things that that try to grab your attention, right? They are grabbing your attention with things that are as divisive and as loud and as difficult as possible, instead of a system where the same, one person on the air every night that everyone's watching together has to try to get as many people on the same page. It's just a completely different world. Coming up next here, Louisiana Senator John.
So it's also pretty wild that Scott Jennings, who constantly tries to spin and deflect, is out here talking about how we don't have a shared reality, when he spends so much of his time backing up Donald Trump and defending narratives that many people see as disconnected from reality. We're talking about a figure who's pushed claims like people eating cats and dogs, or that the 2020 election was stolen, and who described those involved in trying to overturn the results as patriots. And instead of clearly pushing back on those claims, Scott Jennings often reinforces that version of events, rather than saying plainly, no, the election wasn't stolen, or no, that's not actually happening, or acknowledging that what happened was widely described as an attempt to overturn the democratic process. So first, it's a bit much for Scott Jennings to act like he has nothing to do with the breakdown of a shared reality. And second, when he talks about divisiveness, he tries to pin it all on Democrats, saying they hate America or support adversaries, while continuing to defend one of the most polarizing figures in modern politics. Donald Trump has repeatedly used strong language toward the media, calling them the enemy of the people, and has labeled political opponents in extreme ways. He regularly criticizes and mocks others in public statements. Yet you rarely, if ever, hear Scott Jennings say, I disagree with Democrats, but I also recognize that my side contributes to the tone and division sometimes. That kind of acknowledgement just doesn't seem to come up in his appearances on shows hosted by Kasie Hunt, Abby Phillip, or Caitlin Collins. Instead, he sticks to a consistent line, and yes, he's clearly built a career around it. But I want to hear from you. What do you think about all this? Do you believe Democrats are responsible for most of the divisiveness in the country, like Scott Jennings argues on Kasie Hunt's show? I don't see it that way, but maybe you do.